सर कोई बात नहीं, रात को 9 बजे भी कपड़ा ड्रॉप कर सकते हैं।
Macha, I finished this presentation at 2 a.m. only. So sleep deprived.
నాకు ఈ ఆపరేషన్ చాలా అవసరం, కానీ మా కంపెనీ లీవ్ ఇవ్వదేమో.
My domestic worker is on chutti again. Can you believe it?
Hello and welcome to L is for Labour, your source of information for all things labour. This series takes you through the world of work in India. Today, we're going to talk about work hours. Now, the subject of work hours has been in and out of the news cycle for a while. Most recently, the chairman of Larsen & Toubro, S.N. Subramanian, was noted saying, quote, "I regret I am not able to make you work on Sundays," end quote. Also suggesting that it is better to work 90 hours a week. The subject was also in the news in 2024 when Narayan Murthy, co-founder of tech giant Infosys, propagated a 70-hour work week. Now, if you were scrolling through these debates on social media whilst working towards a 2 a.m. deadline and feeling incredibly frustrated, you are not alone. The truth is, aside from these extended working hours being illegal and not in compliance with Indian national laws, Indians are already amongst the hardest working people in the world. According to statistics from the International Labour Organization, Indians rank 13th amongst the world's most overworked populations, with over half our workforce also working for more than 49 hours a week. Now, backing this push for longer work hours is often the trope, just work harder and you'll be sure to succeed. But how true is that really? Something that changed my way of thinking about this was a play named The Death of a Salesman by American playwright Arthur Miller from the late 1940s. The protagonist of the play is a traveling salesman named Willie Loman. An older man, Willie believes that the recipe for success is simply hard work and charisma. But as he ages, his financial struggles become increasingly tragic in a world of heightened competition. The play is considered to be a critique of the American dream, the belief that anyone, no matter how poor, can be successful as long as you work for it. Superficially, this could sound alluring. Just work hard and everything will fall into place. But this narrative thrusts on the individual what should actually be considered from a systemic lens. For one, not all households are equal. It is easier for a child from a rich family to aspire to become a CEO than a poorer one. This narrative hence ignores key systemic issues like race, gender, caste, nationality, class, and economic status. So, coming back to this push by industrialists for longer work hours, is part of what they are touting a homegrown version of the American dream. At the heart of this debate also lies the struggle of generations of workers for regulated working hours, dating all the way back to the 19th century. During the Industrial Revolution, workers across Europe worked exhausting hours, with much of the British working class toiling for 10 to 16-hour days. Also roughly associated with this time period was a famous incident in 1886 in the United States known as the Haymarket Affair. A violent confrontation between workers and law enforcement occurred during a national campaign in Chicago for an 8-hour workday. Some workers and law enforcement officers died from the violence, and a few workers were even executed. To date, this incident is associated with May Day or International Workers' Day. So the advocacy for an 8-hour workday or 40-hour work week, which has set the standard around many countries in the world, actually has its roots in a struggle that is centuries old. Closer to home, our own history of regulating work hours dates back to India under British colonial rule. The first instances of regulation came about during the 1880s. Advocacy for the 8-hour workday was also pushed forward by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who served as the Labour member of the Viceroy's Executive Council from 1942 to 1946. The 8-hour workday was then adopted in 1942 owing to his emphasis on fair working conditions. Now, the number of working hours a day has serious implications for workers across the country, with the impacts varying by the type of job people have and the specific types of pressures workers face. In a country where 90% of our workforce is informal and many are daily wage workers, the implications can be dire. Here is an example from the garment sector, which tends to be dominated by women workers.
Even if they get sick, you can't often make sick leaves as well, because the attendance incentive also is made for the workers to not to take leave often from the work, because the attendance incentive also is given 30 to 40 rupees. If they lose that nearly per a month, like if they take often leave, they can't take like 10,000, even 10,000, 9,000, they can't even earn, especially for garment workers. They are paid 470 rupees or something like that. So if they take leave, the government defined wage is 373. Like it is a very, very low, except wage, all the price have gone high. So even if they take leave, they will lose that money as well. So this is the major mental pressure in which the women workers are working every day in the garment factory. There are very good factories, especially in the agreement factory where we work. We make sure that even for emergency, sanitary napkins are available in their nursing rooms. But whereas, except this one factory, which we know, the other factories, they don't avail that supports. Also, not only that, going to toilet breaks, I'm not saying that directly the management is opposing them to go to toilet, but the nature of work itself, has the capacity to control them using the toilet breaks. See, usually normal day, like going to urinal break itself will take 5 minutes of walk from their working floor to the toilet, then using of water. If I have to change my sanitary napkin, I need additional 5 more minutes to wash and replace and come back. So by the time I come, the number of clothes will be like beyond my head, it will go. So that stress again I have to, also in the position wherever I sit and stitch, again go back and coming again and seeing that stress, I don't want to. Oh, let me once finish and let me go and change, or go back home and change.
We also spoke with a mental health professional to understand the various aspects of workplace environments that are important to consider for mental health. Please note that the context we speak of pertains more to corporate environments.
They may not know that there's what's happening is someone is working overtime to catch up, and that might lead sometimes to a gap in, okay, what are the resources that I actually need, how many people do I actually need to do this particular project or job or whatever, right? Because employees may or may not necessarily be saying that this is what they're doing in their weekend or in their free time or in their flexible work arrangement. So it's a very interesting thing that speaks to, again, sort of that hustle culture overall, kind of this idea that I have to be giving it 150%, because if I don't, I think the fear is that I'll have some penalty. So we also see a lot of like vacation guilt in a certain way, right? And while the answer, of course, is having policies around taking time off and vacation and all of that, it's more about one, are we leading by example, right? Like, are we seeing a lot of other people in our teams and across taking leave, right? And when they're on leave, are they still working, or am I still sending WhatsApp messages and getting responses? So one is on a policy level, of course, which I think a lot of organizations have, but it's more about then how do you set an example and how do you set the culture around the balance between how much you work. I think the research is quite clear on working hours in terms of, over a certain threshold, it can cause health issues, and I think It's very interesting in some organizations, if you look at their ergonomics department, look at how busy they are, right? And that can also give you some indication on the kind of stress that particular group might be feeling, because, the body or the soma is one avenue where we kind of store our stress, right? And so how does that manifest? Aches, pains, injuries, falls, things like that. So when you have a very, very busy ergo department, they're also in a very unique position to, ask their employees, hey, are you feeling stressed? Because stress affects our body posture, the way we sit, the way we move, and of course, muscle tension. So I think that's the different ways in which stress does show up in the workplace, but we don't always identify it as that.
Now, when looking at the laws today, we are governed by the 1948 Factories Act, which limits the daily working hours to a maximum of 9 hours a day and weekly hours to 48. The new labor codes, in an attempt to apparently simplify our existing labor laws, now suggest a maximum working day of 12 hours with a potential 4-day work week, but maintaining the weekly working hour limit at 48 hours. The new codes are yet to be fully implemented. As we discussed, a large portion of our population already works far in excess of these limits. But despite their tough working hours, many Indians demonstrate a pretty positive attitude throughout their hardships. Here are some comments from a sugarcane vendor in Thane.
आप क्या काम करते हो?
मैं गन्ने का मशीन चला रहा हूँ।
और आपको ये गन्ने की मशीन चलाते कितना टाइम हुआ?
हमको इतना हो गया, अपना 6-7 साल हो गया मशीन के पास। अभी सुबह में चालू करता 9 बजे, शाम को 9 बजे बंद कर देता हूँ। दोपहर में 2 घंटे लिए बंद कर देता। अगर ग्राहक आते हैं तो चालू करते, नहीं ग्राहक आते तो बंद कर देता हूँ। ये है हम लोग का, मालूम है।
तो आपको लंबा समय काम करना चलता है?
नहीं जमता है ना, अब पैसा मिलना बनता है बस। काम कुछ भी हो मैं करेगा, मैंने क्या पैसा होना चाहिए।
आप कहाँ से?
लखनऊ।
It is also worth remembering that we live in a context of extremely high inequality. According to the last economic survey, corporate profitability soared, but the increase in wages lagged, as can be seen in the graph. A 2024 report shows that it would take 941 years for a minimum wage worker in rural India to earn what a top paid executive at a leading Indian garment company earns in a year. Before we sign off, perhaps it is worth mulling over why we work, as well as the other important things in life, such as happiness and a shared sense of community. Back in 2012, an Australian nurse named Bronnie Ware began recording the regrets of the dying while she worked in palliative care, and her initial blog post went viral. The top 5 regrets that she recorded were: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And I wish that I had let myself be happier. Like the sugarcane vendor who has no time to think about his busy schedule, many in India do not have the economic capacity to ponder over what makes them truly happy, since they are in survival mode. But if it is at all possible, perhaps we should all be a little bit more mindful of Bronnie Ware's message. Life is precious, and none of us should be living our last days thinking, I wish I had not worked so hard.
The migration story.